Hello, and welcome back to Jess Reads. I know I've been gone for a while, but I'm back now. Tonight's story is one that I really enjoy. The first time I heard it, it really kept me on my toes. I hope it'll do the same for you guys. Without further ado, let's get into it. When I finally got home, I spent more time than usual in the shower. It had been a long day. My mind felt foggy and exhausted, and the hot water helped. Once I dried myself off, I headed downstairs for my nightly pre-bed ritual. Veg in front of the news, catch up on the headlines, then get some much-needed sleep. But today it was all wrong, right from the start. To begin with, the main news anchor was someone I'd never seen before. Some smug-looking blonde guy who introduced himself as Hugh Argylty. Must have been his first day, I guessed. Although if it was, he spoke with the confidence of someone who'd been doing the job a lot longer. Hugh rattled through the main global headlines, the ongoing political mess, escalating foreign tensions, but I wasn't really paying attention to that. I was waiting for the latest on a very different story, a story closer to home, one that's pretty much been the topic of every conversation amongst my friends and colleagues for the past week. And, sure enough, Hugh did not disappoint. Swiveling in the chair behind his desk, he stared straight into the camera and cleared his throat. As he began speaking, I felt a familiar dread building in my stomach. Police are expanding their search for the so-called meat cleaver killer after the body of a third victim was discovered late on Tuesday afternoon. This has been the latest in a string of horrific murders that have plagued the... I listened as Hugh Argylty reeled off the background to the case. I knew most of the facts already. Ever since the first death had been reported on a road not far from the office, it had been all anyone could talk about. Theories about the killer, grim details not available in the papers, rumors of severed limbs and dissected bodies, non-stop gossip and updates, non-stop fear. I guess a serial killer is always going to be a big talking point, but when the murders are happening in your area, it's different. You don't just feel like a distant observer anymore. You start to feel unsafe. It was as this thought crossed my mind that something happened. Something I was unable to explain. I couldn't make sense of it at the time, and I suppose I still can't. It made me feel like I might be losing my mind. The camera zoomed in for a close-up on Hugh Argylty's face, and he stared back into it, his blue eyes unblinking. When he spoke next, it was as if he were addressing me directly. Police are advising residents in the area to take extra care when walking home alone, especially after dark, and to avoid quiet and poorly lit places at night. And if your name happens to be Sam, we'd advise you take extra care. Now, on to the weather. I blinked and stared at the screen. Had I really just heard what I thought I'd heard? Had Hugh Argylty just said my name? Of course it couldn't be. It couldn't be. I was tired, that was all. Exhausted from a long day. I'd been struggling to sleep lately, and it was probably just catching up with me. At least, that's what I told myself. But no matter what excuses I made, something was wrong. I knew it was. The sense of dread I'd felt when Hugh Argylty began his broadcast sat in my stomach like a stone. I picked up the remote and flicked off the TV. Then, after a moment, I picked up my laptop. In the age of live streaming and catch-up, there was no need for me to overthink this. I'd obviously just misheard Hugh, and by going on to the news channel's online stream and rewinding it a bit, I'd be able to prove it. I navigated to the site and found the live feed. I dragged the little time marker back a couple of minutes, and as I watched Hugh Argylty launch into his roundup of the headlines again, I felt butterflies in my stomach. But not too many. I was pretty sure watching back the footage would set my mind at ease. It was a mistake, that was all. A simple case of tiredness and fear catching up with me. I'd heard something that wasn't really there. And this time, as Hugh rounded off his segment on the meat cleaver killer, I leaned in close to the screen. I watched as the camera zoomed in on his unsmiling face, and as he began giving his safety warning, I held my breath. Police are advising residents in the area to take extra care when walking home, especially after dark, and to avoid quiet and poorly lit places at night. And if you happen to be in the house on your own, then whatever you do, Sam, don't look under the bed. Now, on to the weather. I slammed the laptop shut. I threw it on the sofa next to me. I was breathing fast, and I could feel my heart thumping in my chest. There were no excuses I could make this time. None. I'd listened carefully, I'd concentrated, and I was absolutely sure that I hadn't misheard anything. Hugh's advice was different to the first broadcast, but it was clear enough. Whatever you do, don't look under the bed. From upstairs, I heard the soft creak of a floorboard, and I froze. Every nerve in my body suddenly tingled. I held my breath and stayed as still as I could, straining my ears over the sound of my pounding heartbeat. But nothing. No more noises. No more creaks. You're imagining it, that's all, I told myself. All of it. It's just your tired mind playing tricks on you. But I suddenly found a horrible image pushing its way into my head. The image of a man upstairs, hiding in the darkness, his eyes and teeth glinting in the shadows beneath my bed, his fingers tightening around the wooden handle of a meat cleaver as he waited for the sound of my footsteps on the stairs. I shook the image off. My hands felt hot and sweaty, and as I picked up my phone in a desperate attempt to distract myself, my fingers slipped across its surface. I unlocked it on the third attempt, had to wipe my right hand on my jeans before the thing would even recognize my thumbprint. With the screen unlocked, I tapped on a random news app, without thinking. A list of stories appeared in front of me. My eyes scanned down it. This was more like it. The top of the app was filled with entertainment news and celebrity gossip, mindless stuff. As I scrolled down past the latest headlines, my heart rate gradually began to slow. I started feeling less afraid. But, of course, it couldn't last. About halfway down the page, I came across a headline that read, "Meat Cleaver Killer Claims Third Victim as Police Widen Search." I scrolled quickly past it, and as I did, that same creeping dread began to shift and roll in my stomach once more. Because it was happening again. The same inexplicable stuff I'd seen on the TV and on my laptop. The next headline that caught my eye was this: "Police advise residents who live alone to leave the house as quickly as possible." The one directly below it read, "Is the meat cleaver killer closer than you think?" And finally, just below that one, "Whatever you do, Sam, don't look under the bed." The name of the last article's author was Hugh Argylty. I locked my phone and placed it on the coffee table. My hands were shaking. Something fragile in my head was starting to bend. It hadn't snapped yet. No, not yet. But it was close. I could feel it. close to the breaking point. And as I sat there on my sofa, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I had to go upstairs and check the bedroom. I had to do what the news was telling me not to, because there was no man hiding under the bed. Was there? It was all in my mind. It had to be. It was paranoia brought on by fear and a lack of sleep. I stood up and walked to the bottom of the stairs. They stretched up into the darkness. My skin felt itchy with sweat. My heart beat like a trapped animal in a cage. I strained my ears for any sound upstairs, any more creaking floorboards, but I couldn't hear a thing. So I began to climb. The walk up the steps and down the hall to my closed bedroom door felt like a dream, a nightmare. I didn't want to go in that room, not at all. I knew there was nothing to be afraid of, not rationally, but the thought didn't help. Dread consumed me. Despite how I felt, though, I couldn't see any alternative to confronting it head on. I took a breath and pushed open the bedroom door. It creaked inwards. My room was a nest of shadows. The curtains were drawn across the window, and the darkness made everything look sinister. My wardrobe and chest of drawers hunched in the blackness like a monster ready to pounce. I reached around the doorway, my hand shaking, and flicked the switch. Light spilled into the room. Its brightness made me squint. It banished most of the shadows, but not all of them. As I stood in the doorway, quickly scanning the area for any signs of movement, my eyes came to rest on the bed, at the sliver of darkness just visible beneath it. My bed rested against the wall at the far end of the room, a nice, big double bed. From my current angle, I couldn't see underneath it. Not properly, anyway. I knew I'd have to go in for a closer look. The floorboards creaked as I moved across the room. Each sound made me wince. The dread in my stomach rolled and churned, and my mind continued to bend beneath an enormous weight of fear. And as I got closer to the bed, something started to happen. All the unusual things I'd heard and seen in the news began rushing through my head, a barrage of words and sounds. The longer it went on, the more a strange conviction grew in my mind that I was seeing the pieces of a puzzle I hadn't quite managed to fit together yet. A puzzle that it might be better if I didn't solve. If your name happens to be Sam, we'd advise you take extra care. Is the meat cleaver killer closer than you think? Whatever you do, don't look under the bed. The words whirled faster and faster in my mind. I was standing in front of the bed now. As the dread and terror inside me reached a crescendo, I lowered myself to my knees, and I peeked beneath it. Click! The final piece of the puzzle suddenly slotted into place. Hugh Argylty, the news anchor I'd never seen or heard of before. I said his name again in my mind, more slowly this time. Hugh Argylty. Hugh R. Gill T. As I spoke the syllables, I peered into the shadows beneath the bed and felt a fragile part of my mind rip in two. There was no man hiding in the darkness. There was only a plastic bag, and as I reached into the shadows and grasped hold of it, I already knew what it contained. I pulled the bag out into the light, heard it scrape across the floorboards, took a deep breath, and opened it. Inside was a stained meat cleaver and the bloody, severed stumps of 3 fingers. Hey there, I hope you all enjoyed this story, and I hope you'll join me again for the next one. If you have any requests or suggestions, please leave them for me in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe for future content, and take care of each other. You never know what's lurking in the darkness. Until we meet again, this is Jess, signing off.